So today we're going to build on the previous beginner yoga video that you've been working on. Think of this as kind of like part 2. So we focused previously in the beginner class on down dog, on our first kind of back bend, the cobra or upward dog. We learned about Tadasana, our mountain pose, and we also put all of this together into our sun salutation A. So we'll definitely be using those today and kind of moving ahead with some new poses, asanas for our practice. So I have my props, again, my strap, and 2 blocks so that if they're needed, we have them available. Also, I didn't mention in the previous beginner video, but I always also have a towel. This can be used for one, just to keep your mat from being slippery, especially if you're not used to doing down dog and you have a new mat. But also it can kind of be used as a prop as well if you don't want to unroll your strap, but you want to help have a little more reach to, say, reaching for your toes as well. So we have both of these. Let's begin like we did in the previous beginner video, on our back. Feet nice and flat, knees bent. Again, we have plenty of room around our mat so that we can put our hands out in T position. We can do that now. Before we begin moving, let's be intentional about our breath. Let's take a slow, deep inhalation and exhalation. Again, inhalation, focusing on breathing in through the nose. And exhaling through the mouth. Begin to add some movement. Let's bring our feet to the edges of our mat. Let's let the knees separate. We're going to let the legs fall to the left. I'm keeping my upper back down on the mat here. Bringing the knees back to center. And then we'll let them fall to the right. So we're just getting a little bit of hip internal and external rotation. Good. Let's move through this now dynamically. God, I talk. Left. Inhaling to center. Exhaling to the right. Inhaling to center, exhaling to the left, just back and forth at your own pace. So, bringing the legs to center, we're going to do a similar motion, only this time we're going to put the knees at a 90-degree angle. So you can see I have a straight line up and across. Hands are in T position down on the ground. I'm going to let those legs fall, only this time I'm going to control that movement with my core or my abdominal strength, pulling those legs back to center. Again, exhaling as the legs fall. Inhaling, pulling them back to center. Exhaling. And inhaling. One more time. Good. Let's bring both knees into the chest. Split, move, split. And exhale into happy baby. Again, all of these poses now that I haven't mentioned specifically were covered in our initial beginner intro to yoga video. Again, once we're in happy baby, if you like that dynamic stretch to lengthen the hamstrings out, you're welcome to do that as well. Perfect, guys. Okay, so let's bring those legs back to center. Slowly release the legs to the mat. Sit yourself up. Now, before we stand all the way up and we begin our sun salutations, I want us to take what we call in yoga Sukhanasana, or easy pose. So it's just a simple cross-legged position. Now, easy pose is meant to be very, very comfortable. There's a variation to easy pose, which is lotus pose, which has the legs, sorry, my pug, has the legs pulled all the way up on both sides, and it's definitely more advanced. Split, 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 girl. Sorry, guys. And that pose is definitely more advanced. So again, easy pose should be easy. So as we sit here, we're gonna do a beautiful inhalation, and as we exhale, we're gonna twist. Right hand to the opposite knee. Back to center. Exhaling, twist. Inhaling back to center. Exhaling. So we're getting rotation in that lower half of our spine. And we're pairing that with our breath. So this is that vinyasa style movement. Good. Now, we're gonna do that one more time. We're just gonna add to it. As we twist, left hand's gonna go behind the back. Then we're gonna take a big breath in, let's circle. Bring the arm up and let it cross all the way across our knees, kind of rounding that spine out. Beautiful, and then sit back upright. Same thing, opposite side. I'm gonna take my left hand, cross it across to my right knee, open that chest to the right, hands directly behind me, and then I'm gonna lift, reach forward until it crosses all the way over. Good. And returning to center. Beautiful job. Let's get our feet underneath us. We're gonna move through our sun salutation A's by taking our first mountain pose at the front of our mat. Again, Tadasana, or mountain pose, always begins with those palms open and up, or hands at heart center. Let's begin with those palms open and up. Anytime our hands take a posture or a mudra is what it's called when we change our hand positions. The hand positions signal something to the body. So bringing our hands to heart center is trying to kind of feel or center our emotions. Having palms open and up is signaling the body to also relax and be open to the flexibility exercises, the breathing exercises, whatever it is we're working on moving forward. So that's why hand position is very significant in yoga. So here we are, palms open and up. Centering our breath, and then we'll take a big breath in and reach up. And exhale like we learned in our previous video, hinging forward into our forward fold, reaching for that ground or that block. Good. Inhale, flat back. Let's do that same sequence one more time before we do our full sun salutation A. Hands go down, deep breath in, reach up. Hands to heart center, and then Tadasana. Again, big breath in. Exhaling, forward fold. Inhaling, flat back. Let's hold our forward fold briefly. Once we're in our comfortable forward fold position, let's just kind of walk that forward fold out, meaning we're just alternating bending left and right knee, kind of letting those hips shift, left down, right down, back and forth, feeling a stretch. If you feel like a needed or necessary stretch, you're welcome to kind of hold there before moving on, or if you just like that dynamic back and forth movement, you're welcome to kind of continue that walk out. Good. And then let's go ahead, pause, even out. Let's inhale for a second, flat back. And then let's move to our step back. Exhaling, remember, all in one exhale, we step all the way back, toes or knees, and we lower that belly to mat. Good. From here, let's take our upward dog or cobra. Good. Now remember, we don't have those shoulders in the ears. We have those shoulders pulled and rolled back, lifting nice and strong through those hands. Good. And then let's exhale, down dog. Just like we did in that forward fold, why don't we walk our down dog out a little bit? Just kind of side to side. Good. Hips can tilt right and left. Make sure we're feeling really good. And then we'll finish off by centering our down dog. Remembering all the little details we learned in our first beginner intro to yoga video. We pulled our belly in, we lifted that tailbone high, we bend the knees and lift the heels if necessary. Crown of the head points straight down to our hands, so we have a nice straight line from the spine all the way down to the tops of our heads until we're ready to transition out of that down dog. Eyes looking up, stepping or hopping forward. Good work, guys. Forward fold. When you're ready, inhale, big reach up. Exhale, Tadasana. Let's do that again. Big breath in, reach up. Exhaling. Forward fold. Inhale, flat back. Exhale, stepping or hopping back. Lowering to the mat. Lifting, upward dog or cobra. Exhaling to down dog. Now, instead of stepping forward and finishing that sun salutation A, we're going to transition to a different asana. And that asana is going to bring us to our knees, and we're going to sit back on our heels. So what this is called is extended child's pose. So arms stay out in front. We sit those hips on those heels, and forehead rests comfortably on our mat. Beautiful work, guys. As you, I'm sure, can feel, child's pose is a recovery pose. We can always take kind of various forms of child's pose. Sometimes we can bring our hands all the way alongside of us. Other times, maybe we want to take a wider kind of child's pose with the knees open really wide so that we can really let that chest fall nice and close to the mat. Do you guys see that? Good. Perfect. Let's go ahead and exit from child's pose, walking our hands back up. So we're in this kneeling position. Traditionally, this kneeling position is referred to as half hero pose. For the full pose, we sit the hips all the way down on the ground. But again, this is often kind of a resting or recovery pose. If it's uncomfortable on the feet, the toes can come right underneath. You can sit right on the heels. I want to talk really briefly about our hand positioning. For a lot of these asanas that have weight in our hands, So it's hard to see in a video sometimes, but we want to make sure that anytime we're pressing into our mat with our hands, we have our hands spread like nice and wide. The main thing we want happening is that we want to be getting good contact on the mat through like all fingers. But we want the primary contact, and this is important, we want the primary contact to push kind of through this C, okay? So meaning we're not like pressing into the ground really hard on the sides of our hands. We want to make sure we're kind of pressing inward, just ever so slightly, okay? To also make sure we're doing that, and since I'm facing the camera so you guys can see, in Cobra, Upward Dog, Down Dog, a trick to help press through the inside and have good hand position and also have good position all the way up to the shoulders is to make sure the inside little fold of your elbow kind of points forward, okay? Because what that does, you'll see it kind of like rotates or externally rotates by turning the upper bone and lower bones in your arm outward, okay? And then it gives a little more focus to, again, that inside portion of the hand. So like I'm gonna be off my mat right now so you guys can see, but you can see how I'm not like folded in like so in Down Dog. I have good contact throughout the hands, but that point in the elbow is pointing relatively forward, okay? You just wanna make sure you're not like, oh, I see a lot of beginners really like correct and like it ends up like rotating them really in. Same with Upward Dog. We wanna make sure we lift and you can see that part of the elbow is pointing forward, okay? So, kind of back to where we were. If we are on our hands and we're working on that pressure on the inside portion, we're going to go ahead and do some wrist stretches from our hands and knees. So you can see here, hips are right over the top of my knee, hands are nice and flat into the ground, okay? And we're just gonna do kind of circles. Bringing our shoulders out in front of our wrists, to the sides, and back. So obviously the pressure gets a little heavier in the hands when we come forward and eases off when we come back, okay? Now even when you're doing these exercises, you can keep that stomach tight, keeping that lower back nice and flat. We're not letting it like totally drop out like that. We're keeping it nice and flat. Let's go both directions. And then I'm going to go ahead and pause. I'm going to actually flip my hands. So I'm going to point my fingertips back. Ooh, my wrists are tight. And then I'm just going to kind of like ease back, letting the palm of my hand lift ever so slightly. Good work, guys. Take your time here. If ever you notice something's like really tight, you don't want it to cause any like sharp or sudden pains. So if that ever happens, like back off. Even if I'm like, oh, do this stretch or that stretch, listen to your own body first and foremost. But especially here, like maybe your wrists are really tight and this is too intense of a stretch, you don't have to participate. You can sit this asana out and then join us when we move on. Because like here, I'm gonna turn fingertips pointing out towards the outer portions of my mat. And I'm gonna just do kind of like side to side. So what's important about these stretches is you may be familiar, and you can continue just the side to side motion. You can be familiar with like a lot of people stretch their wrists just like this or like this. The difference there versus what we're doing here is that we're loading weight onto the hands. And in yoga, we put a lot of weight in our hands and on the wrists. And so stretching them in a loaded position, meaning we're already pressing weight into them when we're stretching them, is a lot more efficient and specific to the exercises we're doing in this class. So that's why this is like a really good way to stretch. Last but not least, very, very careful with this one, please. Because we are gonna do one arm at a time. We're gonna flip the wrist over. And again, we are still gonna load it, but this is an unnatural position for the wrist. So you see I'm putting a lot of weight in my hand here and just ever so slightly pushing some weight onto the top of that hand and then leaning back. So we get that stretch all down the front of the forearm, okay? For beginners to yoga, especially if you're not used to doing a lot of body weight exercises on your hands, like push-ups or things like that, the full yoga sessions can be really taxing on the hands and the wrists. So these stretches become really, really important if you're noticing that. If you're noticing that the wrists are fatiguing or becoming really painful, you'll want to pull these wrist stretching sequences out multiple times, like even a day if you can. So see, I'm just moving to the other side. Good, you see that? Yeah. Again, these are a little time consuming, so we won't do them in every video and in every class session. But I want you guys to have these that you can watch, you can participate in, and then you can do them on your own as well, before or after maybe participating in a given video. Good work. Okay, so I'm just gonna shake it out. I'm gonna kind of flick my hands. Great wrist exercise. Flicking the fingers, roll those wrists out just a little bit. Beautiful work. Okay, so let's come back onto the hands and knees, just long enough to introduce cat stretch. So remember earlier when I said I wanted that back to be nice and flat? Now we're gonna do the opposite. We're gonna round the back out, just like a cat arches their back. And on our exhale, we're gonna do the opposite. We're gonna allow that lower back to drop. We're gonna pull those shoulder blades back and together with that head and neck. This is cow stretch. And it's oftentimes we pair these together. We go back and forth. Inhale, cat. Exhale, cow. One more time. Inhale, cat. Exhale, cow. Good work. Then we bring that spine into that nice neutral flat position. Toes underneath us, stepping back or lifting the hips back into down dog. Now I mentioned earlier how sun salutations or vinyasas are something we do very commonly. So in a general class, you'll often hear or see me refer to taking a vinyasa. So if we're recovering in down dog here, it's also very easy to add just a short vinyasa like so, lowering down, lifting into that back bend, and exhaling back to where we started in our down dog. Most of the time these vinyasas are optional, so you're welcome to add them at your leisure or join me if I add them, or you can just hold that down dog. Okay, let's lift our eyes to our hands, step or hop forward, forward fold. And then big reach up. Beautiful breath in and exhale to Tadasana. Okay, let's introduce a new pose. Our first of our standing sequences. We're gonna begin in our standing Tadasana. From here, we are going to step back. I'm stepping back with that right leg. So what this takes me to is kind of like a lunged position. Now, what's really important about the leg positioning for our next pose is that we want to have good alignment, meaning we are creating a line that goes down the front of this foot, and that line goes all the way down. It should hit right at our back heel. So here, I'm gonna turn both directions so you can see me. So if I step back, you can see how this right foot is just slightly turned out. But what's very important in this pose is that our hips are facing forward. So watch me square that off. See how my feet didn't change positions, but a lot of times we naturally want to open these hips, meaning like open up to the long side of our mat. We want to square them off. We want them to be facing forward, okay? So notice my back knee is relatively straight, nice lunge, bent knee forward. From here, we inhale, lift our hands up. This takes us to warrior one. Again, a very quintessential yoga pose. It comes up a lot. It's a good entrance or exit to a lot of other poses. Very similar to warrior one is warrior two. And from here, watching from like lower half down, the difference is we had the squared hips in warrior one. Now we're gonna open the hips. So see how like my whole chest and upper body as well as my hips open to the long direction of the mat. So we go from warrior one to warrior two. Now at any point, if you wanna like lengthen your stance, you can. Say your warrior one was shorter, but you can have a nice open, deep warrior two. That's always fine. Eyes look straight through the front of the hand. Balancing here. So let's transition back and forth. Inhale, warrior one. And exhale, warrior two. Inhale, warrior one. Exhale, warrior two. So we can even use both directions of our mat. I can rotate, put that right leg forward now, warrior two on this opposite side. Inhale, warrior one. Exhale, warrior two. Inhale, warrior one. Square those hips off. Exhale, warrior two. Turning it back. Warrior two and warrior one. Now notice my back heel is down, okay? That is because just having a slight change in lower body by lifting that back heel and dropping that knee ever so slightly, this takes us to a high lunge or a high crescent lunge. So that's a different pose technically than warrior one. So we can go high crescent lunge, warrior one, warrior two. Understand? Good job, guys. Okay, let's go ahead. Rotate. High warrior one, warrior two, warrior one, high crescent lunge. Let's go ahead and exit from here. Let's bring those hands down. So we have a hand on either side of this front foot. Notice how I'm kind of walking my back toe back and straight leg. This is runner's stretch. So this is a different yoga pose in and of itself. And from here, this is generally a good place to exit because we can drop the knee down if we needed to and step back. Or we can keep those feet underneath us. Hands get planted, stepping back and lifting to down dog. Again, settling here. This is also the time where, if you'd like, you can take that vinyasa. Good work. Eyes looking up to those hands, stepping or hopping forward. Good. So let's reach up. We're gonna do our warrior one sequence one more time. So if you remember, I did flip us just a few times, flipping around so you could see both sides of my hips. But we had initially stepped back with just our right leg. So now we would step back with our left leg, warrior one, warrior two, warrior one, high crescent lunge, to warrior two. So we can combine all these movements relatively easily. Once again, returning to warrior one, releasing to runner's stretch, stepping back to down dog, and taking that vinyasa. Again, just a reminder for any of you, especially lowering to that mat, if you feel that you're dropping really, really fast here, anytime you're doing that vinyasa, lower those knees to the ground and control that lower, okay? I'd always rather have my students have controlled motion and movement rather than trying to do something without modification that then becomes uncontrolled. Eyes looking up to the hands, stepping or hopping forward, forward fold. And let's slowly roll up, bringing the head and neck last. Beautiful, okay. We're gonna add one more thing in for this class. Let's go ahead, begin in our Tadasana. Let's work on balancing, our first kind of balance pose. So if you remember, Tadasana is mountain pose. So if I said, let's take Ekapada Tadasana, that's Sanskrit for single leg mountain pose. So meaning I'm gonna lift one leg, but I'm still holding this traditional mountain pose. Good. From Ekapada Tadasana, we'll often step back to that warrior one. Good. Exhaling to warrior two. Let's add reverse warrior. Reverse warrior is going to take this front hand, it's going to reach it up, right hand's going to reach down or rest on that leg, or if you want to add to that, you can even bring it around the back. So again, warrior two, inhale, reverse warrior. Notice how I can even deepen this lunge ever so slightly and we get a big reach back behind us. Good, back to warrior two. And warrior one. Good, stepping forward, re-entering Ekapada Tadasana. Again, very controlled. And then to mountain pose, opposite side. Inhale, Ekapada Tadasana. Stepping back, warrior one. Warrior two. Exhaling, reverse warrior. Inhale, warrior two. Exhale, warrior one. Inhale, Ekapada Tadasana. Exhale, Tadasana. Inhale, big reach up. Exhale, forward fold. Inhale, flat back. Exhale, step or hop back. Lower to the mat, control that lower before we inhale. Upward dog or cobra. And exhale, down dog. Beautiful work. Let's take a child's pose. Sitting back. Two more breaths here. Good. Let's return to the hands and knees. Cat stretch. Cow. Cat. Cow. Good job, guys. Okay, let's pause once again, because the next exercise, this becomes very important for making sure our shoulders are active so that our wrists don't get injured in the long run. And when I say injured, I mean just kind of from overuse, because ideally our shoulders should be carrying the majority of the force or our weight, and we shouldn't be quote unquote dumping into our hands or our wrists. But if no one's ever taught you about that, you might not even realize you're doing it, and then over time you might develop wrist pain. So we want to prevent that. And so the best way to learn about that is learning to understand what protraction and retraction is of the shoulders, okay? So, since you guys can see me on the video from the side, right? If my hands were out right now, I am currently just have very neutral shoulders. Here, pause for a second, guys. I just want to make sure the video's going. Okay, good, still going. I have very neutral shoulders, meaning my shoulders are just right in line with my shoulder blades. So when we, just a few seconds ago, were in cat pose and we round it out, we can do that same thing having those hands up here. We can like round that spine. You see that that's that same motion? So it's like we're pushing that ground away like we did in cat. This rounding is called protraction. Retraction is the opposite, like we did in cow stretch, right? When we pulled the shoulder blades back together and we dropped that lower spine. But think of it not as much in the lower spine, just in the shoulder blades. Like you're retracting, you're trying to pull and hold like a little walnut right between your shoulder blades. So we can go do protraction and retraction. So think about it, not as much moving the hips or the lower back, but just moving those shoulder blades. Again, if you've been in a gym or you've taken weightlifting, retraction is what we do whenever we just pull like a weight towards us. But you have to realize you can retract without moving the elbows. Now, say we are in push-up position. So this can be our knees or our toes, okay? A lot of times, if people have weaker shoulders or don't know about protraction or retraction, they kind of hold like this. So this is what I mean by dumping into my shoulders, okay? I'm not protracting enough to hold that body up. So to get stronger at doing that, we're gonna do the following exercises. From either the toes or the knees, we're simply going to take the shoulders and protract and retract. So it's just like a shoulder blade push-up, back and forth. Now notice, ideally, I'm trying to see in the camera, making sure how good I'm doing these. Ideally, the hips and the spine don't have to move much for you to do these correctly. Up and down. Good work. Shake it out just a little bit. So just so you have an idea of this, I always show my class in person just to demonstrate it, but to show again how much the shoulder blade really does support the weight that goes into those hands and wrists. Like if you look, so I'm gonna turn face away from you so you guys can see my shoulder blade. If I turn and held a side plank, but I held it not with like that shoulder blade being engaged, it dumps like that. And it's actually really uncomfortable. So I always tell people, like the amount of action we have in this shoulder blade by pulling up, that's gonna be the saving grace on the wrists moving forward. Because if you guys are doing sessions 4 days a week for 6 weeks or 5 to 6 weeks, like that can be really challenging. So especially my summer courses, make sure you're doing your wrist exercises. Okay, so from here, let's do one more round. Push that ground away, protract, retract, protract, retract, back and forth. Make sure you're breathing, not holding your breath. When things get challenging, let's do one more set. Good, let's then take it to down dog. So hopefully you feel from transitioning from having shoulders over your wrists to shoulders pushed way back in this down dog, that this is meant to be a recovery pose. Beautiful work, guys. Let's lift our eyes to our hands, step or hop forward, forward fold, and big reach up. Exhaling, Tadasana. Beautiful work. Let's go ahead and lower ourselves to the mat. Now we're going to take our Shavasana. So if you remember, Shavasana is meant to be very relaxing. It's meant to be recovery. You can take whatever position you want. One thing I didn't mention is since we're like at home, you're welcome to get a pillow or a blanket if you're more comfortable on your mat, but still make sure you take advantage of Shavasana. That is something that is very, very important to kind of complete the whole exercise that is yoga. So we never skip on Shavasana. We always make sure we lay back, get comfortable in either corpse pose or whatever is your most comfortable Shavasana position. And we'll have a few minutes here of quiet.